This is the VIP Podcast, Virginia in Politics. Let's listen to host Chris Saxman explore the personalities and policies that connect the Commonwealth. The VIP Podcast is brought to you by the VCTA, Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. The views and opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the VCTA and Virginia Free or our sponsors.
Okay, this is Chris Saxman back here on the VIP Podcast, brought to you by VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia and Virginia Free, of which I am the Executive Director. That's the Foundation for Research and Economic Education. Been around since 1988, bringing the business and political communities together to engage with one another to create a better, more vibrant, free enterprise system in Virginia, with the responsible pro-business government. That's an important thing that we've always cherished here in Virginia. Actually, Virginia was a company before it was a colony. That's how much we are in tune with our free enterprise system and having our economy grow so that it can provide the revenues for our core services in government, and so that we don't increase the tax rates and the burden on taxpayers and businesses alike. Joining me now, Delegate Karen Greenhalgh of Virginia Beach. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I love it here in Richmond.
The first session, you're a first-year delegate. We don't say freshman. Do we say freshwoman? What do we do now? Is that a thing?
So no, we call ourselves freshmen.
Okay, there we go. We're in a new era.
Yes,
everything has to be like, don't want to be too touchy over here, and make sure everyone's okay over there. Is that a thing we're seeing in our culture everywhere we go now? Is that everyone's supposed? Can we say that? Should we say that? Have you experienced that more and more in politics?
So yes, I think we all have. Not just in politics. I think that's.
Did you see that in your election? Your first time out?
No. I thoroughly enjoyed running for office and meeting people. And most people, even if we didn't agree, we could just have a wonderful conversation, and found we agreed on more than we expected.
And you find that more and more in politics when you get to actually meet people and see them face to face. It's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, available on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Thanks for playing. Is to get to know our elected representatives a bit more, and to understand why they're here. Delegate Chris Head was in earlier. Asked him why he's running. Continues to run. He's in now, I think, in 11 years. He's now running for the state senate. Delegate Greenhalgh, what was the tipping point for you to decide you were going to run for the House of Delegates?
I just think we need two things, basically. I want to see people with common sense in office, and I want to see people with business experience in office, because I think those will help us that experience helps you make a better decision. So I started a few years ago working with people that I wanted to get in office or keep in office, help them win their primary so I could vote for someone I liked in November. Because too often I was having to vote for people that didn't keep their word, or I felt were just saying what they needed to get elected. More on the federal level, but that's how I got involved in politics. I said, to have someone I want to support in November, I have to get involved in the primary process.
And when did you start getting involved in politics?
Yeah, it's probably been 8-10 years ago. And I was walking doors for people I wanted in office, making phone calls, doing whatever they needed as a volunteer, my husband and I together.
Well, what made you do all that?
I just saw we were losing track in Virginia. It just felt that we were getting off course. I love our Constitution, federal and Virginia Constitution, and we were getting off track from the basic principles that have made us strong for so long. I mean, I don't have to tell you, but our U.S. Constitution is the oldest in the country. I mean, no country has had the same Constitution for over 200 years. And those foundational principles are why. It doesn't mean we can't change or have new ideas or incorporate other concepts. I mean, we're growing and changing, but we have to hold to those principles, and I felt like they were being lost.
Why do we have to hold to those principles? What is it about Karen Greenhalgh that gets you off the couch, the old term, getting off the couch and getting off your duff and doing something? What made you get in the game? Was there a moment, or just a continual erosion away from the principles that you espouse, you bond to, or cherish? I don't want to put words in, but it seems that way. What was the moment or feeling that you had, like, no, I'm going to go do something?
So I think just realizing we're losing the concept of self-government. We are responsible for ourselves. We hear a lot about liberty and freedom, but there are two sides to that. I mean, there's also individual responsibility. And it just seems as though people are becoming more and more dependent on the government, and I don't think that's good for us as individuals. We need to be responsible for ourselves, and the government step in and help when someone needs help, but not take care of us. I mean, you've heard the term cradle to grave, government assistance, and I think for individuals to be responsible for themselves is where we find out where our strengths are.
Okay.
I mean, when you sorry, I hit the mic. So when
You're fired. That's it.
So when you face a crisis is when you find out how much you can do.
Right.
It's like in school and a teacher gives you a project and you think, oh my gosh, I can't do that.
Right.
Or your boss gives a new employee a project.
Right.
But then you jump in and try and do it and say, I can do that. And if we don't expect people to do the best that they can do, then how do they ever learn how far they can go, what they can achieve, and how strong their character is?
Again, to not put words, but this is, I think, one of the foundational elements of the conservatism, Americans for Prosperity. Jacob Fish was in here earlier. That was a very substantive policy discussion. They talk about the full potential of the human. And do you believe that is, with the growth of government, that's an encroachment on the development of every person? And where do we draw the balance between providing the safety net, providing the vehicle for them to become independent and becoming too dependent on those very programs? Because we can't just say, well, off you go, and let them go do it and discover, because there's that balance. And that's what this whole thing's about, isn't it? Is maintain that balance. But is that a fair description or summary of the balance between in your governing philosophy?
Well, yeah, I think it is a good balance, which is why I want people who have business experience. Because when I started my first business, and I was so glad to hear you say you're pro-business, I started it in my garage. I would have loved to have gone to college, but there was no money. I mean, my dad was working 2 jobs to take care of his 3 girls and have a house for us. So I started my first business in my garage, grew it for 20 years.
What was the business?
I built cabinets.
Great.
A cabinet.
You're a cabinet maker.
Yes, sir. There was a time when I could design and build your cabinets and your countertops. We were one of the first computerized. But just that process of something that's so challenging, and you understand you learn how to work with people. And my employees, I had some of the best employees, but it was also an opportunity to give people a chance. I hired a man who was a convicted felon. He wrote to me. He had served his 30 years for murder. Wrote to me, and the only job he'd ever had was in a cabinet shop that his father had. As a teenager, he was drinking too much, partying too much, helped his dad in the cabinet shop, and he blacked out one night, woke up on the beach, there was a dead body, and he was blamed. So he doesn't know what happened, but he served his 30 years, and all he knew was cabinet shop. So he wrote to me, and when he got out of prison...
How long ago was this?
How long ago was this? Probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
But he served his 30 years, and when he got out, they had found a hotel for him. They had to make sure he, had a place to stay. He wouldn't even go to the hotel. He said, "No, I go for my job interview first." And I'll never forget. He'd been in prison for 30 years. My office was on the 2nd floor, and I knew how old he was. We'd written. This was before emails. We'd written, and I watched him coming up the steps, and I thought, oh my gosh, he's a lot older than I thought, because he was struggling to get up the steps. But it's because his legs had been chained for 30 years. When he was out of his cell, his legs were chained. And so he was struggling just to get up the steps.
Wow.
But those are people like that. All he wanted was a second chance, one of the best employees I ever had.
Is that right?
And he was still there when I sold my business, yes sir.
Wow.
And to know when to give someone a second chance, to know when to help someone so that they can still be the best they can be. Yeah. I'm really struggling to not say his name, but that's all he wanted.
It's a powerful story.
Yes.
And so in Delegate Greenhalgh, in balancing the government programs and getting people to be independent, mindful of the returning citizens, as the felons are called now, as a way to return them to society. Where do we draw the balance in all of these programs and taxing authority and the governing authority. I mean, how do you come at that as a freshman into this new reality of yours that you live every day with all these bills coming at you that don't deal with these things that you're used to dealing with? You're on committees that don't deal with business, right? You're on P&E and education. Education does to a degree, but CTI, you have these bills that you kind of go, what is this? Where do you draw the lines on these things?
So, well, and as I said, common sense. And I think most business people have developed common sense along the way in how to work with people and judge character. But I've really not seen any bills that I couldn't read and understand and make a decision based on common sense. And where to draw that line is where so often we disagree. But that's why I want more business people in office. And as far as education, I'm a mom, grandma, and with my 3 children, we did private school, public school, which was wonderful. By the way, we started in public school, and homeschooled. And both of my children went to college. And even though I didn't, I'm a firm believer in education. And so just bringing the experience, you have to admit I have a lot more experience at my age than a lot of the freshmen coming in. But with my business experience and being a mom and a grandmother and just working with people, I've done volunteer work in the community, all of that comes into play. And a lot of it's just common sense and caring about other people. If someone doesn't have to agree with me on everything,
Sure.
to be able to be civil and have a conversation and discuss why do we not agree. It's education's a good one. Walking doors.
Sure.
So often people would say they believed that we needed equal outcomes. We had to have equal outcomes for the children. And I said, equal outcomes are good, but if you're just lowering all the standards to have equal outcomes, then that's not good. Let's help every child be the best they can be. And it's a complicated problem, but I do think it's one that we can solve. And I'll never forget one man, I met him in his driveway, and it was in the summertime. It's very hot. We were both sweating, and I said, I feel so sorry for keeping you out here. And he said, this is fascinating. I've never talked to a Republican before.
Yeah.
But we had the best conversation because he was an older gentleman. And he said he grew up in segregation. He knew what it was like to be that hurt. His children did not. His children grew up, they could be what they wanted to be. There are always conflicts between people.
Sure.
But his concern is for his grandchildren. Because he said in the public school system right now, they're being taught to look at race in a way that his children did not. And he's worried about his grandchildren growing up the way he did because of the concepts. And those are big issues that we have to deal with.
Those are really big issues right now. I mean, the nation is almost transfixed on these particular issues and how important it is to teach all the history, the good, the bad, the ugly, as many of our statewide leaders have said. And you're on education now. How are you able to keep the balance on the committee with all these hot button issues that are coming up? I'm sure there's a lot of hot button issues. And is that committee fairly civil, given all that is being put upon them on these divisive concepts or these political constructs that are coming at us that you probably didn't run on in the beginning? That's not why you chose to run. It sort of came to you and said, oh, by the way, you're running? Here, you got to deal with this. And you're like, okay. Tell me about that committee. What's going on there?
Well, for the most part, we're very civil. It's not like you see on TV. For some reason, you put a microphone in front of someone and they say things that they would never say in the middle of a conversation, which is a shame. But we're having really good conversations, and I think we all want strong families. We all want good education for our children. We all want them to grow up and be skilled and know their strengths,
right,
and be able to be a wonderful employee or start their own business in their garage. We all want that. Where we're disagreeing is how we get there.
Yeah.
And we have to stay calm and have conversations like we're having to figure out how we get to the goal that we want for our children. And it's complicated. And I think for the most part, we all mean well. And as long as we can keep talking, I honestly believe we can work through this and have a stronger Virginia.
I saw you early this morning at Winston-Sears reception for delegates and legislative aides and senators. And before y'all came in, I'm reading a book. It's an advanced copy. It's a wonderful book. I'm going to hold it up here for our camera. called Why America is Free. And it's by Jack Warren. He heads up the Society of Cincinnati. This is an advanced copy. You still need, this is how you get the...
Can I have it when you're finished?
Well, I'm sure Jack would love for you to have one.
I love to read, yes.
Well, it's a history of our revolution. I'm a former history teacher and government teacher, and there's some fascinating stories in here that tie together this notion of why we are free. And in the construct that you're talking about, the racial construct, in the Declaration of Independence, most people don't realize it wasn't just written by Thomas Jefferson. It was written by 5 different people. He was the primary author. And he didn't argue for it when it was presented to Congress. He let John Adams do that. He didn't want to defend his own writing. And one of the things that this is where a passage from the book, the most dramatic passage deleted from the draft denounced the king for permitting the African slave trade to continue. Thomas Jefferson, in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, put that in there, and the Congress took it out. Can you imagine our country if they had left it in?
That's fascinating thought,
isn't it? We don't teach this part of our history. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. We have to cancel him. I mean, he was putting it in our foundational documents to get rid of the slave trade, essentially. He was known as an abolitionist. But we don't teach the entirety of a person. We like to take a tweet, a phrase, and turn it against them and condemn them. You know, and that's one of the hard parts about politics today. And because when I showed this to Winsome, an immigrant from Jamaica, she goes, yeah, I thought everyone knew that. I'm like, no, not everyone knows this story. And I think we're so far off the page from one another. And when you get to look at a bill, you're on the same page as the people around you. You're looking at the exact same words to come to an agreement. Here, our foundational documents had this element to it, and it was taken out. And we realized sometimes the best of ourselves was lost in that moment when we could have gone, yeah, we should probably do this. It doesn't make this is not congruent with who we are, who we're saying we are. And we had the chance to do it that many years ago.
It would have saved a lot, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it have?
Yes.
But could we have become the country that we eventually became because it wasn't in there? And that's a conversation we have to have today that we're not. Because who we are as a people, I don't think we're truly discussing. We're so divisive, and we're taking these elements just to divide each other in the binary political reality that we have. I'm sorry for the rant. You're welcome.
That's okay.
But it's striking to me that we have it better than any people in the world history ever. 99.99% of people who ever lived don't have it as good as we do.
Yeah.
Think about this. And yet we're so divided.
Mm-hmm. When you look at how far we've come, and again, I mean, I'm 65, it's not a secret. But
well, it wasn't until just now.
So well, I think I thought it was public information. Oh no! But that's
we don't
okay.
discuss age here. Come on.
But when I was very young is when school segregation was beginning, and I'll never forget my mom sitting down, me and my older sister.
Integration.
Yes, yes, integration.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I said that backwards, didn't I?
You'd be really old if that was the case.
No. And my mom set us down, and it was Hodges Manor Elementary School in Portsmouth, and said, when you go to school this fall, there may be, and again, the terminology then was colored, but there may be black children in your school. And we didn't care. I mean, we weren't taught to think differently, but my mom's point was, if there are, and we said, well, we'll be nice, Mom, of course we'll be nice. She said, I know you'll be nice, but the point is you have to go farther. You be the one that sits beside those children.
Really?
You be the one that sits with them at lunch.
You're emotional.
My mom, yeah. And
Why
you
are you
be the
emotional
one
about that?
Because we've lost that. And my mom said, when your friends see how you behave, they will behave the same way.
And what period of time are we looking at here?
So
that'd be mid-60s?
In the 60s. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the beginning of integration. This is when
Yes.
the civil rights era.
At the very beginning.
This is when this was hot and heavy.
Mm-hmm. And my mom knew we were going to face this, and she knew that we were raised to just accept people the way they are.
You've had some powerful moments here, and you're emotional now.
I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful.
But I still remember that.
I think, look, I'm like the Dick Vermeil of politics. I'll cry at a drop of a hat because I'm so moved by this country and what its people can do. And I'm glad you're emotional about these things because it shows that these things mean something to you. And when I asked the first question of why you ran in the first place, and when we left the reception, I said, why did you do this, right? Because it means something to you. And that's what we have to tap into and share with our fellow, your fellow legislators and your folks back home, your citizens, your residents, to change what we need to change. Because if they can't see someone's true emotions and true feelings, how can you ever bond to them and understand them? That's what I want to understand about you. Okay. I treasure it, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, well, that's how I feel. I mean, everyone has the right to be taken by their character and the decisions that they make, not how they look. And honestly, all those years my mom raised us so well, I don't remember the first time there was a person of color in one of my classes. I honestly don't remember when it happened. It was just so...
The same way in my neighborhood growing up in suburban Detroit.
So,
there was no plurality.
Yeah.
There was no plurality. And that was a wonderful element of my childhood. And so when I moved to the South, it was like, I didn't understand the whole reality of some, and especially in the Shenandoah Valley, when frankly, it really isn't, it wasn't as divisive in the western part of the South, the Appalachian Blue Ridge area. We can do the whole history thing, but I won't belabor. But I'm really moved by how deeply important this is to you.
Yeah.
And how do you look at legislation in those terms?
To just try and fix the divide that we have now. And when I was walking doors, if you can get someone to have a conversation and realize how much we have in common, and that it's not right to judge people by how they look. And you'd be surprised some of the mistakes that I've made by not judging people the way others do. I just
we'll be here all day sharing our mistakes.
So, but I tend to look at people and not see things that other people see. I just judge people for the conversation that we're having, not an outward appearance. And it's. Is
it what you thought it would be? It would be the legislature?
Yeah. Yes, it really is.
Okay.
Because for the most part, and again, we have exceptions. I'll be honest, to both parties, we have exceptions. But for the most part, people are here because they have good intentions. Mm-hmm. We just have to figure out how to translate our good intentions into the best decisions for Virginia, so we can get back to where we were when I was a little girl, and trying to just do what's best for all Virginians instead of vying for power.
Right.
That's
the one thing. When I said goodbye to the House, I said I would miss the people in the room more than anything else, because I respected them all, because I knew what they did to get here. At a base level, everyone has to do the same thing to get in that room, to be able to work together to get things done. And otherwise, why are you here?
Yeah.
But what pulls us apart, though? What divides us? I mean, you're a heartfelt, earnest, hardworking citizen who ran for office, when most people don't. Your initial foray was in your mid-60s. Most people get out well before then. But, to your credit, you said no. That's why I asked, what got you going? What keeps you there is important to understand. But what is dividing us, Karen? What is it that we need to overcome? So
we don't talk to each other anymore. Like the man who said, I've never talked to someone who said he was a Republican. I also met a young lady. She actually was an organizer in one of the Black Lives Matters protests. And I met her, and we're friends. So she texted me yesterday, said, I'll be home from college in March. I said, I'll be home from Richmond in the middle of March, and we'll have lunch again. We have lunch like once a month. And we just don't connect with people anymore. And we just found where we have common ground. And
why don't we connect anymore? What's separating us?
I think a lot of it's the media. Social media, we see, as you said, we see the memes, we see the clips, little quips that people make, and we think we know the whole story, and we don't.
Yeah.
You can't get the whole story in one sentence, and you can't get the whole story by making a joke about someone. And we have to get past that, and we're not going to do that unless we have a conversation.
And that's why we're doing this podcast.
And which is wonderful. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Invite your colleagues to come join us. Let's get to know Karen Greenhalgh a little bit better. You're self-admitted 65.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought everybody knew. Yeah.
Isn't that funny how everyone thinks something about you? It's just weird, right? And everyone goes, no. So you're basically 10 years older than I am, mid-60s, you go in high school, early 70s, very different time, around the civil rights movement, around the Vietnam era, but what are your favorite TV shows? Let's get to know you a little bit more personally. What do you like to watch?
I don't think I have a favorite TV show.
Just one? of all time?
Oh, one of all time?
Sure.
This is going to sound crazy, but I love the old ones like Lucy.
Okay.
Lucy took on a lot of challenging topics. If you go back to the I Love Lucy show, but
For the time, it was
yeah.
on the edge. And most people don't think that, right? They were
Or
living,
Archie
they slept
Bunker.
and slept. Oh,
Oh my gosh.
Archie Bunker today?
Yes. So
All in the Family.
Yeah. And
So, but you like the shows that cut the edge a little bit there.
Yeah.
Cut the edge off.
And today, I mean, even, dare I say something against the Marvel movies, but even those are becoming politically correct. And
Too touchy? Like you have to
yeah.
Because what I loved about the era in which we grew up, the All in the Families, is that they made fun of what they're trying to overcome. Satire, and we can't. And I think Bill Maher speaks this very powerfully on his HBO show, where he just says like, when did we become so so frail with humor? Why can't we have Blazing Saddles was written partially by Richard Pryor. Why can't we have these conversations? Because those started the hard conversations.
Yes.
With the humor. Why is that funny? Because it's true, right? Favorite movies?
Favorite movies? I love Places in the Heart.
Okay.
So that was a favorite. And To Kill a Mockingbird was one of my favorite books and favorite movies.
Okay, Gregory Peck.
So yes. And
Atticus
it's
Finch?
back to the same issue. You have to help people, even if you don't have things in common. You can still reach out a hand and give people a hand up.
Well, you mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird as a book. Other books that are a favorite of yours?
Well, I like Gone with the Wind. I like Les Mis. I mean, just the history in there is fascinating.
There's a thread in there. There's a thread in there in all of those.
And Jane Eyre is.
Have you looked? Okay.
Jane Eyre has such a strong Christian theme that I've never seen come out in a movie. But if you read the book, she made very hard decisions because of what she believed. Very, very hard, because she believed she had to do what was right. She had to do what she believed was right and what God was going to hold her accountable for. And that doesn't come out in the movies.
Karen, there's a theme throughout all of this. There's a theme throughout all of this. What do you think that is in you?
That I care about people, I suppose, maybe. I hadn't put
No
it
wrong
all
answer.
together.
It's your introspection. I'm just. What I love about asking delegates and senators who come in here is are these questions. Who are you? And they're not the same, and yet they are. They all have this thread in their lives, and when they start examining it, and we start looking at them, going, oh, it's not the Republican and the Democrat, right? The liberal and the progressive and the conservative and the moderate and the rhino and the dino and all that kind of stuff, which I hate. Those labeling of people, because we're more than our labels. Far more than our labels, politically especially. And when we do that, and your colleagues see this, go, well, I like Jane Eyre too. I like All in the Family. Today, Chris Head was on here, and he likes Downton Abbey. Well, so does Jennifer Boysko.
Oh, I watched that one too, yeah.
Well, it's a great show.
Yeah.
It's a great show. Sports teams, do you follow sports at all? Do you have a favorite?
No, I have done sports. When I was watching football, it was Pittsburgh Steelers.
Give me some of that.
Yeah. When I was doing NASCAR,
what do you mean? You're still watching the Steelers, right? Because you're like a diehard fan, right? That's what I understand.
So, no, I don't keep up with sports anymore, and I don't keep up with NASCAR, but I did pick Ward Burton.
Okay. Now, why don't you follow sports anymore?
So, just
time?
Just the time. Neither one of my children were interested, and so, you go with, but both my children are history buffs. So,
really?
Yeah, I have a very deep genealogy, yes.
What, have you done the Ancestry.com test?
No, not the test. Because I do privacy for healthcare.
Okay.
I don't want to give out my genetic code to anybody. Your thumbprint is not private anymore. If you've ever done the.
Well, that scares me now.
Yeah,
since I did it
privacy
about 3 years ago.
is a big issue, but my daughter did do our genealogy, and it's very interesting.
What is the genealogy?
So, have you ever heard the term Melungeon?
I've heard of it. I forget what it is.
Yeah, it's mixed race, and I have ancestors who lived in a Melungeon colony. Because they were mixed race, they were too dark to be white, too white to be
dark
African American or Spaniard. So they.
And where was the Melungeon?
In Western Virginia.
Western Virginia. I should know this because that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in West Virginia?
Southwestern Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky.
Okay.
They just sort of congregated, and I actually have ancestors that lived in those colonies. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, have you gone back and explored them?
I am in the process right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yes.
Any particular books that you've read in the subject, or want to go with like areas you have to go to? If you contacted the delegates and senators down there, I have to come see your area because those are where my people are
Well,
from.
I'm in touch with the Melungeon Historical Association.
Oh, so
right
you've gone
now,
down the
just
path.
just trying to confirm what appears to be true. Yes.
Okay, that's fascinating.
It is.
What bills are you working on?
I have several bills that are different. Instead of the mainstream issues, I'm working on informed consent for women facing an elective abortion.
Okay.
And this is not to interfere
Sure.
between her and her doctor, not to convince her to make any particular decision. But right now, the Department of Health has guidelines for other elective surgeries, but they have totally deleted the section on abortion. There are no guidelines. The General Assembly took out what was required for informed consent. And an elective abortion is the only elective procedure. Face it, if you were going to have LASIK surgery or knee replacement, you do your research, what kind of procedures, talk to your family and friends, who do they go to for doctors, and when you met that doctor, the doctor knows you have choices.
Right.
The doctor is going to meet with you because he wants you to choose him because you can go somewhere else.
Okay.
With an elective abortion, typically you go in, you have the procedure the same day or very soon. There's no requirement for any information to be given, and there's typically no follow-up. Follow-up is go to the ER. I worked at a crisis pregnancy center for 10 years between my two businesses, and I had a client call me from the ER, and she said, I'm here at the ER, and they're asking me what did they do, and I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know what to tell them. And for a woman to go and face any procedure and not have that sort of basic information is appalling, I think. And so we're just trying
what's
to
the
get
bill
that
number?
back. It is House Bill 212.
And this is your bill?
Yes, it's my bill.
And how did it do in the House since we've passed crossover?
It passed the House.
What was the vote?
Well, it was unanimous in the House, I believe.
Unanimous?
No. For the Republicans,
Oh, yeah. I mean, what was the floor vote?
party line.
Okay,
Straight
so
party line.
52-48.
Yeah,
Okay.
straight party line vote.
What's the prospect look like in the Senate?
Well, I'm hoping we can make a difference because it's
Education and Health is the next committee.
Yes.
And when's that bill up?
We don't have a date yet, but I'm expecting it probably Friday.
This coming Friday?
I'm hoping, yeah.
Okay, so
I
you
think
got your work
it's
cut
gonna
out.
be soon.
You've got your work cut out for you
Yes,
on that
sir.
one to get that.
Yes,
I
sir.
think that committee is 9-6. It's not 8-7.
But when I was walking doors, whether the woman was pro-choice, pro-life, didn't matter. I did not meet a single woman who didn't believe a woman has a right to information before she makes a decision. And that's all this is. No waiting period, no ultrasound, none of that, nothing controversial, just basic information so she can make an informed decision.
Okay.
I think she's entitled to that.
Okay. What other bills are you working on?
I have the SRO bill for schools.
School resource officers.
Yes, which we put quite a few changes in because it was a very hard-hitting bill. And so now we've made it where you can have a school security officer instead of just a school resource officer. So you
Is that a cost factor?
It's a cost factor, but it's also you can have unarmed security.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to have the armed police officer.
But just someone there.
Yes, and and we've taken into account that some localities even have middle school and elementary school in
the
one
same
building,
building.
so they can share
Highland County
share
has them all.
officers, and
Okay.
and we've clarified the funding a good bit.
Right. So both those bills, do they have any fiscal impact or require any budget amendments?
The SRO did.
Okay, but
So-
the informed consent didn't?
No, the
Okay.
Department of Health said it was so easy, and this is information from the Department of Health. No one outside. We're talking about basic information here, and they said there's virtually no cost. They didn't see it as a financial impact at all for that one.
Any other bills?
So
Those are the big two?
those are
two big ones to go home with.
Those are two big ones, and then I have one for to allow doctors and pharmacists to prescribe and dispense FDA-approved drugs for off-label use, which
What's off-label use?
off-label use is a pharmaceutical company has a drug approved for a specific use. Like me, I've had one for over 10 years.
Right.
It was developed for asthma.
Okay.
So they test it, they find out what's the dosages are, what's safe, who shouldn't use this because it can cause high blood pressure, that kind of thing.
Right.
But it's only approved for one specific symptom, in asthma. I
Right.
don't have asthma, but I use this prescription because it helps with the symptoms that I have. That is
Oh, okay.
off-label use. And 20 to 25% of all prescriptions are off-label. If we had pharmaceutical companies get a medication approved with that complicated process, none of us would be able to afford them. But doctors know they can look and
this one will help her
decide
out with.
what will work.
Okay.
And in pediatrics, there's a lot of off-label use because they're dealing with children and there's not necessarily medication that's designed for children.
Okay.
There's a lot of off-label use in seriously ill children. And another one is oncology, cancer, because every person's cancer is different, treatment is different, reaction to treatment is different, and so often they're treating symptoms. So just like my asthma prescription is treating a symptom, but I don't have asthma.
Right.
And so I see right now there's some interference trying to keep doctors from prescribing or pharmacists from filling certain prescriptions for off-label drugs. And I see it as the first step in interfering with something that could be very serious consequences for everyone.
Well,
That's
Karen
my other
Greenhalgh,
big bill.
Karen Greenhalgh, that was your big bill?
I said that's my other big bill.
Other big bill, okay.
You said I only
you
have two, I
got
have
three big
three.
bills.
Yeah.
Freshmen normally don't carry that kind of a load, so congratulations to you for taking that on.
Thank you.
Karen Greenhalgh joining us from Virginia Beach, first-year delegate. Won a very close election, 150 votes if I...
115.
115, well, landslide. Congratulations on that. I'm Chris Saxman on the VIP podcast. We have a new VIP in the house, Karen Greenhalgh. This was brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, now VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free, of which I am the executive director. Thanks for joining us. You can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Thanks for joining us.